Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock here on a Wednesday. Browns getting ready to play the New York Jets on Sunday. New play caller this week, all sorts of stuff going on. We'll have our full preview pod coming up on Thursday night, Friday morning. So I guess let's talk about this because this sort of became the story of the day. David Njoku, who rarely talks to us, did talk to us today. He brought up his feelings about not being traded. Now, Mary Kay, you've been reporting he wasn't going to get traded. All indications were that he was not going to get traded, but it was at least something people talked about. A guy in the last year of his deal, approaching the age of 30. Would there be any chance the Browns would change their mind? Obviously, it didn't happen. So David Njoku today, in very typical David Njoku fashion, talked to us about his feelings about it, said he was terrified. I don't know. I kind of thought he was joking when he said that, but said he wants to be in Cleveland for life. Of course, that is significant because he is a free agent coming up. And I was just trying to think to myself, what does this look like? What does David Njoku finishing his career in Cleveland look like? Because obviously they have to figure out this contract. They have a succession plan in place. We're in this era where like 12 and 13 personnel is sweeping the league. And of course, the Browns are very heavily involved in that as well. What does it look like for David Njoku to stay in Cleveland? What kind of extension? Like, how does this play out? What do you think happens here?
You know, when I looked over the tight end salary numbers today, I was kind of surprised that the top tight ends haven't even cracked $20 million a year yet. George Kittle is the highest at 19.1. Travis Kelce comes in at number 3 at $17.25 million. That's nothing when you're talking about pass catchers that make such an impact on the game. If you look at the wide receiver salaries, you've got Jamar Chase up at 40. You've got Justin Jefferson right behind him. So the top 3 are 34 million and above, and those will only climb in the offseason. So I think tight ends come at an enormous bargain for really good pass catchers. And if the Browns settle down their quarterback situation, then I think David Njoku would have plenty left in the tank. Look at how old Travis Kelce is. I'm not exactly sure how old he is, but I think he's 35. And David will only be turning 30 in July. So he should have enough left in the tank to come out next year and maybe even the year after and play some good football for the Cleveland Browns. In addition to being able to catch the ball, he's an excellent blocker. So I think he provides a ton of value, and I think for the price that it's worth the money. But I think what they will want to happen, and I'm not sure about this, but I think what they want to happen is let him go out and set his market price and see what he can get on the open market. And once they do that, they can come back together and decide how this is going to work. David wants to finish his career here. We know how the Browns feel about David, but I think it's right player, right price. So if they can get him for the amount of money that they think is feasible, then I think they will be open to re-signing him. But even Andrew Berry did not guarantee that when we asked him about it at the owners' meetings in March. He said sometimes these guys, we can do the long-term deal again. Sometimes we don't. So we'll have to see how it goes. But I think he's worth coming back for double-digit millions for a couple of years after this.
It's an interesting setup because obviously you've got Harold Fannin, who you just drafted. He's had a nice start to his career, and his cap numbers are so low over the next 3 years just because he was this third round pick, right? So he's $1.5 million next year, 1.8 the year after that, 2.1 in 2028. And I would imagine that if not by next year, by 2027, you'd be looking at him as he would be your tight end 1. And David would be your tight end 2, but you could still pay David more just because Harold would be making so much less still on that rookie contract. Ashley, I think I agree with Mary Kay on this, at least to the sense of I would let the market kind of set things for David Njoku, and I would just sort of see, like, what does the rest of the league really kind of think of him from the standpoint of, again, a guy who's going to be 30 in July, I believe. Yeah, he's going to be 30 in July. He's been dealing with injuries the last couple of years. He's been playing at a heavier weight in part to help him block. Would that be something that would change if he went to another team? Would that be something that would change next year if he stayed here? I feel like that would be the move. Now, there's some risk in that if somebody offers him a deal he would want to sign, but I guess it's my long way of saying, like, if I don't have to pay David Njoku 10 or $11 million because nobody else is going to, then I don't want to do that. So, see what the market says and go from there.
Yeah, for me, like I just think the injuries are such a big part of this. I think that's why it's kind of warranted to see what the market sets his price at, essentially, right? And I think the nice thing about that room right now is you are set up with Harold Fannin Jr. in there. Like, I think to me, Harold Fannin Jr. right now is clearly like the future and where things are headed with this team. And yes, like David is still, again, like laughing as I say it, like relatively young compared to the years he has been in the league already. But, at a certain point, you are talking about a guy who has dealt with these injuries for the last couple of years now. This passing game is struggling. Like you said, Dan, I mean, I think the weight he's playing at, and I know you guys have talked about this more on the Hey MK pod, like, I get why they did it. I think we've seen him at his best when he's playing at a lighter weight, actually, and he was still a pretty good blocker, even when he wasn't bulked up like this. But I do think just at his age, knowing he is going to be 30, like, you kind of got to see what the market is going to set his price at. And if you lose him, like, I don't think they want to do that, but I also think your room is kind of set up, at least at the top, for the future right now with Harold.
Yeah, and some of this too is right. You're trying to project. So when he first signed that extension, back when was that, 2020, 2021, whatever it was, when he signed that extension in 2022, when he signed that extension, it was this idea of, you're paying for future performance, right? You're trying to project what he's going to do over the life of that contract. And I think that's part of the equation here too, Mary Kay, is like, no matter what you think he's going to do, like whether you're super optimistic about him, whether you're kind of like, hey, I think maybe we're at the tail end. I mean, the reality is he is getting into that, as you like to say about guys, he is getting into that back nine of his career. And so I think your expectations of what he would do, I don't know that he's an 80 catch guy anymore. He had 80 catches in 2023. I mean, that was more of an outlier, but I don't know if he's a 60 to 70 catch guy anymore, but he's still a useful player because of all the things he can do, because he can block, because he can catch, because he can, I mean, he did score a touchdown against New England, right? He can be that big red zone target. So as long as he's healthy, as long as he can stay healthy, there's a use. He's a useful player on this team, even if Harold Fannin eventually passes him. So that's sort of what makes this complicated, is you're trying to project a little bit, not just what is David next year, what is he, if this were a 3 or 4 year deal, what is he in 3 or 4 years, and how does that impact your cap?
Yeah, and when you look at it, when they signed him to this 4-year extension in 2022, what they were doing essentially at that time is providing Deshaun Watson with a really good number one blocking, catching tight end to get him through those 4 years. And it just didn't work out that way. He was supposed to have this 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback getting him the football, and he was supposed to ride off into the sunset and make multiple Pro Bowls, was David Njoku. Now, he did make one in 2023, in part because Joe Flacco came in and did his thing. But it didn't work out for David Njoku here, just like it didn't work out for really anybody else offensively when it came time to having this really good quarterback throwing him the football. So that has been a challenge. It's always been a challenge. You guys know I have said this ad nauseum. I believed throughout that time that he was an 8 touchdown a year tight end. I still believe that. That's what he always should have been. And he came pretty close in 2023. Even though he only had Joe for like the last part of the season, he still came pretty close and made the Pro Bowl and did all those kinds of things when he had someone who could consistently get him the football. For the most part, he hasn't had that. So it's almost a little surprising that he is just, I want to ride or die with Cleveland, which is what he told me in January at the Super Bowl, or February at the Super Bowl. But he wants to be here. This is where he wants to finish his career. And he knows how Andrew Berry has always believed in him. He knows how Kevin Stefanski believes in him. Tommy Rees was his tight ends coach last year. He likes working with Tommy. But I think there probably is more to David than we are seeing this year, because of the quarterback situation, right? I mean, if he had had that quarterback all year, once again, I think there was more to him. I think there was more to Jerry Jeudy than met the eye. And we're never going to know how that would have turned out, because I don't know if the quarterback situation is going to get much better in the second half. But certainly, if David has that quarterback next year, which again, big if, then I still think he can be a very productive tight end.
Yeah, his career is, whenever we're kind of putting a bow on his Cleveland career, it is going to be so interesting because there were these flashes of potential, specifically in 23. Like, that was the David Njoku that the Browns traded up to get in the first round. But it's so strange because, right, like early in his career, he kind of ends up in the doghouse with Freddie Kitchens, and then there's the year where he makes like 3 trade requests, and then all of a sudden it's he gets franchised and extended, and now he's all in on Cleveland. And I do think, like, this isn't the end all, but I do think there's something to be said about a guy, and Wyatt Teller said earlier this week too. I do think there's something to be said about a guy that really does want to be here. As this team is kind of getting into this next phase, to have a guy who wants to be here and wants to be a part of this, and doesn't want to bail on whatever's happening here, whether it turns around quickly or it takes a couple of years. I think that matters to an extent, Ashley. Like, okay, he wants to be here. So if there's a number that can keep him here because he can still be a productive player, I don't necessarily see the harm in that.
Yeah, I think the price just ultimately has to be right. But yeah, I mean, I think looking at this roster now, right, like Joel Bitonio was kind of one of those guys to me that, like, I think Wyatt Teller or David Njoku have the potential to be, in that you're kind of bridging over from one era of the team into the next. And, Joel was obviously here for some extremely lean years, but that O-line was still fairly good. And obviously he's the last holdover from the Joe Thomas years and things like that. And I think those guys are, because we've talked about them essentially straddling 2 worlds, and they're still a part of their core, but obviously just closer to the end of their careers now than they were 5 years ago when Kevin Stefanski first got here. So they have this youth invigoration thanks to this draft class that so far shaping up to maybe be Andrew Berry's best. And it's those guys now coupled with these vets that the Browns still think are in their prime, that they can still get something out of, and soon to be coupled with what we assume will be a stronger 2026 draft class, because we know how much weight they have been putting on that draft class, even going back to the 2025 draft.
Yeah, it would help whatever they do at quarterback. So if they draft a guy next year, obviously, it would help to have a veteran pass catcher like David, who again has had his ups and downs with drops and things like that, but he's generally been a guy that a young quarterback should be able to lean on. So let's transition that into another guy, Mary Kay, that we talked to today, and that's Jerry Jeudy. And obviously his season has not gone the way that he wants it to. He's had a lot of drops. He's not putting up the numbers that he put up last year. This has been, at least for me, this has been one of the weirdest developments of this season, because I thought Jerry had an awesome spring, and I thought he had an awesome summer, and he was coming off of this kind of great breakout season where he had 1,200 yards, and it was like, man, everybody was celebrating this trade as, Andrew Berry found somebody. He made a move and he found somebody on the cheap and extended him at the right time, at the right price. And, great job, Andrew. And now it's kind of like, wait a second, was last year the outlier? Is this who Jerry Jeudy is? I don't think it is. But, he talked today about getting more targets, maybe getting some earlier targets. Of course, Tommy Rees is going to be calling the plays now, so you wonder if that changes anything, if he maybe goes after Jerry Jeudy a little bit earlier on. He did mention that, of course, Tommy Rees was an Alabama guy. He was an OC at Alabama. So, maybe there's that Alabama connection there between those two guys. With Jerry and his frustration, where do you think this goes over the next 9 games for him? Will we see 2024 Jerry Jeudy, or are his struggles going to continue?
I have a feeling the struggles are going to continue because I would have to see some evidence first that Dylan Gabriel is going to be throwing the ball downfield and taking those chances and trusting Jerry enough to make those plays for him. And then Jerry coming through and making those plays and not pressing. That doesn't happen overnight. And it hasn't happened so far. And to think that they're just going to come out of the bye and all of a sudden that is going to be working like clockwork, I just don't know if that's going to be the case. Now, they are heading into the softer part of their schedule. That should help. They've played some really, really difficult teams, some really tough defenses. But I think what we're kind of finding out with Joe Flacco is that perhaps some of Joe's struggles had to do with the fact that his number one receiver was off to a sluggish start this season and just didn't really have it yet. Joe moves on and he's throwing 350 yards, 400 and some yards consistently in Cincinnati. So I think we have to see if Jerry is in a down cycle, in a slump, having a rough year, or if the quarterback upheaval has adversely affected him to the point where he's just off. So I don't know that, we're going to go out this weekend and see Jerry have a 120-yard game. Maybe he will. Maybe he will. That's what they need. They need consistent, good Pro Bowl Jerry to get rolling on offense and in the passing game. And it should help him that Cedric Tillman is going to be back this game, because you can target Cedric Tillman on some of those downfield passes, the throws that you were making to Isaiah Bond, where you were forcing it and it just wasn't necessarily there and it wasn't working. You're going to be able to make some of those throws to Cedric Tillman, and he's going to go up and he's going to win some of those contested balls and he's going to make those catches. So I think that will help everyone. Hopefully for him and for the Browns, he'll come back strong from the hamstring injury. And if he does, I think that opens things up for everybody. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, it's just a bigger body and a different type of receiver, and a guy that at least you have to, like you say, at least you have to know where said Tillman is, and he's a downfield threat, unlike like nobody was scared of Isaiah Bond yet. He hasn't given people reason to be scared of him yet. And, Malachi Corley has done well on, the end arounds and things like that, but he hasn't done it at receiver yet. So hopefully that will help Jerry out. And Ashley, I think, the thing is with like when Joe Flacco was here, it's just so strange that Jerry, there was the play in Detroit that turned into a pick. There were the play against Cincinnati turned into a pick. Just all these weird plays by Jerry Jeudy that just started his season off on the wrong foot, and he just hasn't been able to turn it around.
He hasn't. And, I think I wrote a little bit about it today because I think we saw Jerry getting frustrated after that New England game, obviously, right? Where he wouldn't talk. He only got 2 targets. Just a different look for him, because this is a guy who normally will talk after wins, losses, whatever. He doesn't typically care. But right now, it's like there's no one that's really having success like that in this offense. 2 of 21 receptions against the Patriots came from their receiving core. They are currently, there's only 7 receiving touchdowns this team has, and only 2 have come from receivers, and both have come from Cedric Tillman. They're 29th, obviously, in passing yards per game, dead last in passing yards per play at 4.6. So, until they can start moving the ball downfield, I'm with Mary Kay. I don't see how this is really going to change. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe with Tommy Rees calling the plays, they'll be able to do more stuff downfield, and he'll just work better with some of these younger guys just with all of his college experience. But not only has Jerry been bad, and yes, there's the 7 drops, which are still tied for the league lead according to PFF. But, it's how much of that are true drops versus, which Jerry has talked about this, trying to make a big play because you're losing, or, because that mental side of it is getting to you, and you're not actually seeing the ball through to the catch. So it's not just Jerry. It really does, I think, all go to the quarterback stuff. And it's unfortunate. Some of this is on Jerry, but it's not all on Jerry, because it's not like he's the only guy struggling in this offense right now.
Yeah, and just, I was curious while you were talking there. I was looking up some of Jerry's his contract stuff, and look, these aren't big numbers for a receiver, right? But they're really like they're stuck with Jerry Jeudy as one of their more prominent receivers. He needs to be their number one or their number two, right? Like he's not making $40 million a year or $30 million a year like some of these guys, but there's no changing lanes here with Jerry. He's got to be a big part of this receiving core moving forward. If you draft somebody who becomes your number one, or maybe you go out and sign somebody who becomes your number one, that's fine. The thing is, Mary Kay, it's not just getting Jerry fixed for now. It's getting him fixed for next year and the year after. Like, he's got to be a part of this receiving core. There's no giving up on Jerry Jeudy here. You've got to get this right, and you've got to get this figured out.
That's right. I mean, he's averaging somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, $17 million a year. He's your number one receiver. And when you look at other teams across the NFL, your number one receiver is almost always extremely, extremely productive and dangerous. And it doesn't matter if he gets extra attention. It doesn't matter if they give him them safety help. They go up, they catch the ball, they make their plays, they catch their touchdown passes. And that is not happening with Jerry Jeudy this year. It's really been unfortunate. It's been one of the most disappointing aspects of the season. But the Browns seem to believe, and they are so supportive of Jerry Jeudy, that it seems to me that they are blaming it on the quarterbacks in part. So I know that it's a group effort, and I know that it's both sides of the equation, but they seem to be letting Jerry off the hook a lot and kind of pinning it a little bit on the quarterbacks. So we're going to have to see what happens here. He seems determined. He seems like he's keeping his head up. He seems like he is thinking about the next catch. He's putting the first 8 games behind him, and he seems really ready to come out in the second half and be what the Browns need him to be what Dylan Gabriel needs him to be. And quite frankly, he has to be that because they're not really going anywhere in their passing game unless he can kind of come up off the mat.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I do think there has to be an acknowledgement, and they don't have to sit behind a microphone and say it, but there has to be an acknowledgement internally that, like, he had a veteran quarterback here right? You had 2 veterans who were competing to win that starting job. The guy who won it got traded after 3 weeks. That has to matter a little bit in this pass catching core with both of the guys that we talked about today, David and Jerry. Like, we threw a 3rd round rookie out there and a lot earlier than we expected to, and that has to impact the pass catchers. So as much as the pass catchers have to help him out, I think there has to be some acknowledgement behind the scenes that, like, we also have a 3rd round rookie slinging the ball back there, and that's not going to make life easy on the pass catchers at all. So I think that's an interesting kind of dynamic in all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard to diagnose it and to reach a conclusion about what the problem is. The only way you'd be able to figure it out is if you plopped him down in the middle of a functional offense to see how he fared. And that's not going to happen. And we know that he already struggled with Joe Flacco at the helm, and he struggled with Dylan Gabriel at the helm. And who knows if he would struggle with Shador too. We don't really know. We really, really don't know what the problem is. And again, maybe the problem will resolve now that Sed is back and you've got your number 1 and number 2 guys together, and teams will be able to not focus as much on Jerry Jeudy, and Jerry Jeudy won't feel as compelled to have to make something big happen if it's not there. So I think that's the primary focus for the second half of the season, is to see what you can get out of Jerry Jeudy and see how he can help your quarterbacks thrive.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap up there here on the podcast. Kind of a quiet Wednesday for the most part after that trade deadline. I think guys pretty happy that nobody got moved. So Ashley did drop out on us. We lost her there. So if you're wondering, wait, we haven't heard from Ashley here in a little while. That's why. So we are going to wrap up the pod there. We'll be back here with our preview pod on Thursday with predictions, storylines, all of that stuff. So just make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Find our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns, on cleveland.com. And also hit up our socials on Twitter. We're Orange Brown Talk. On Instagram, we are Orange and Brown Talk. So for Ashley and Mary Kay, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.